For the hitters here, Cosmo Macero Jr. Associates, man who predicted Avatar would be a bomb. Good call on that one. Peter Kagis of the Boston Phoenix, man who is anxiously awaiting Doug Meehan's Barry Manilow interview coming up later this morning.
Yeah, I'm maybe late for work.
I thought you would be. Let's talk about D.C. first, gentlemen. Let's talk politics. Barack Obama yesterday unveiling the results of the middle-class task force headed up by Joe Biden. How can this thing miss, Cosmo? What's going on here? Now they're going to try and buy back the middle class.
I think they need to. I think that you don't have to look too hard to see the shadows of Clinton's first term, and the script seems to be unfolding. You take a beating on health care, you get slaughtered in midterm elections, and then you move toward the center and hope for the best. Well, I think he's already starting to move toward the center, and he's going to need to if he wants to keep the attention of the American people.
They tell us this is not about re-elections or elections, Peter. Barack said that himself.
Never is.
This is about helping people. A, are you buying that? And B, will this strategy work?
No, of course I don't buy it. It's not about election. B, I do buy that it's about helping people. And C, I don't know. It's not high risk. It comes in a moment where, confidence in Obama, let me not try to speak for the nation. My confidence in Obama, who I admire and like, is really shaken. I think they're probably good ideas. What no one's saying is there's going to be a big jobs bill that's coming down the pike. If the jobs bill passes, these are probably a good idea because it's saying, okay, we're going to make a big investment in jobs, and then we're going to hold spending for the next couple of years.
The president spent a year ignoring the relief the American people really needed, not paying attention to jobs, and pursuing his healthcare ideology, which has been an absolute disaster. So it hasn't been a good year, so he needs to do something.
Well, he's got his State of the Union address tomorrow, and we're told in it he's going to mention a spending freeze for the next 3 years, anything other than Homeland Security and Defense, and there's one other. There'll be no excess spending, a spending freeze. Which one of you is believing that for 3 years the federal government with a Democratic president is not going to spend more than they've vowed?
It's only the freeze would only be on a quarter of the government. Listen, most of our spending is on Social Security and Medicaid. Then comes the military. It is important to send a message that you just can't keep spending. That's why I sort of got ahead of myself here. I think there's going to be a big jobs bill before then. And this is, a wake-up call to the nation. Whether this is a nation that can be woken up or not.
The question is, did he get a wake-up call with Scott Brown? And are these two things, the buying of the middle class and the spending freeze, directly as a result of what happened in Massachusetts last week?
I think it's a result of the evolution of the health care bill, systematically, on its way down the tubes, and certainly the Scott Brown election being the huge wake-up call. But, he needs to address what's ailing the country. And the reality is, as much as health care is a problem that needs to be solved, that's not the immediate issue. It's jobs, it's the economy, it's providing tax relief to middle-class Americans.
Once the genie's out of the bottle, usually, it's hard to put him back in, Peter. It's been a year. Now he's trying to go back and say, okay, now let's start. Can he pull this off?
I don't know. I really don't know.
Let's come to.
We mentioned off air Diane Sawyer. He talked to Diane Sawyer about how I'd rather have a good one term than a bad 2 terms. I think that's admirable.
Than a mediocre 2 terms.
Mediocre. I think that's admirable. It means, I'm going to stick to my principles. I'm going to do what I believe in and not worry about it. But I think his principles are just off. They're not what the country needs right now.
As an Obama fan, do you buy that quote, by the way, Peter, that he would rather have 1 good term than 2 mediocre terms?
Well, I believe he believes that, but I'm not sure his performance to date would count as a good term.
I think
how about 1 mediocre term?
I think if more elected officials governed like they didn't care if they got reelected, we'd be a lot better off.
Well, let's talk about what happened last week, because some would argue that this is part of the Scott Brown revolution. Now, who knows? I keep hearing people say I'm a Scott Brown Republican. I'm not even sure what that means, Cosmo. But let's start with this. As you're standing here today, can you still grasp what happened a week ago in Massachusetts?
I think so. I think there's a couple of factors. I think Scott Brown became the populist everyman. And you know what? People like the candidate. And they really bought into him and they liked him. That meant a lot. And it came at a time when there's a lot of anger about health care, about the direction of the country. And then number 3, again, Martha Coakley She didn't run for the job. She didn't run a campaign until it was too late. So those three things, that's what happened.
Now, the question is there a Scott Brown revolution taking over, Peter? Do we have a sea change in this country going on? Are Republicans back in the catbird seat? And is this the beginning of a really big resurgence for the Republican Party?
There is going to be a resurgence. When I say I don't know how big, it's too early to tell. If you take the Scott Brown model, it's the open seats. It's places where there are open seats that it's going to pick up steam. Look, Ted Kennedy.
I think this was an incumbent backlash.
Yes and no.
Absolutely.
Martha. Oh, it isn't. There is there's a strong whiff of anti-incumbency out there. That, by the way, is probably not good for Deval Patrick. Now, listen, I think in recent weeks, Deval Patrick has been doing an excellent job at the State House. But the question remains, he's a bad politician and a good policymaker.
Deval's talking pension reform all of a sudden. Again, is this a direct result of Scott Brown winning that seat last
year? Sure it is, and pension reform will play really well, and good for him.
Our congressional delegation, they're already looking down the business end of redistricting, which is a concern for them. Now, they got to look at how their district is voted, so there's vulnerability there. If you're Bill Delahunt, you got people gunning for you already. And the Cape and the South Shore went big for Brown, so there's some vulnerabilities, I think, in our delegation. Nikki Songas in the Merrimack Valley, where she didn't have extremely strong support enough to win. I'd be concerned if I were her.
Cosmo Macero, Vanilla Associates, Peter Kagis of the Boston Phoenix. They're the heavy hitters, playing under some hail coming down. Cosmo, by the way.
Hail to the Chiefs.
Hail to the Chiefs.